Is there any logic to saying that Rahul Gandhi terrorizes members of the BJP as a party and members of the Sangh Parivar as an ideological family or bloc? Welcome, Swagatham, Vanakkam, Vande Bharatam. In response to the video posted yesterday, in which I made a humble appeal to Rahul Gandhi not to terrorize members of the BJP, some of my viewers have expressed skepticism about the logical foundation or the logical defensibility of my argument. The point that they make is very simple. How can a man who preaches love, in his own words, one who is out to open Mohabbat ki dukan in the bazaar of hatred, the outlet of love in the super bazaar of hate. How can a man who attempts to do so most sincerely, who not only says that this is his claim, his aim, but also does everything that harmonizes with it, how can someone who issues no threat to anyone or encourages anyone to launch physical attacks or strategies of violence against his adversaries, if he has any, how can such a person be even thought of as terrorizing somebody else? Now, in this video, I propose to respond to that query or that principled reservation expressed about my argument. By the way, it's always good and healthy to offer differing or dissenting points of view, because only then we will be able to clarify and deepen our understanding. Clarity is almost always the byproduct of dissent. And that's the reason why I welcome it. But then dissent is not abuse, as I have said on earlier occasions also. I will not go into the explanation of the difference between the two. Now let's stay focused on this. Rahul being accused of terrorizing the BJP. Or as they put it, he is a terrorist. Presumably, he's a terrorist in relation to India, but I don't think anybody will buy that. But I certainly agree with the concern or anxiety and also the protest expressed by the members of this ideological bloc that Rahul Gandhi strikes terror into them. That's the reason why I thought it expedient or even relevant to make an appeal of the kind I made yesterday. Now, in order to facilitate clear thinking, it's very helpful, it is necessary to have what I call semantic clarity. That is, clarity with respect to the meaning of the words that we use. Semantic clarity. Now, there are three words which are unfortunately used as synonyms in India, but they are very different one from the other. These three words are fear, terror, and horror. Fear, terror, and horror. Since our YouTube fellowship is committed to developing a culture of thinking clearly and rationally, I will from time to time offer such semantic clarifications also, because after all, it is through the medium of language that we think, and unless and until we have clarity about the words we use, as Confucius said a long time ago, and as Voltaire repeated several centuries after him, we have to be first clear about the meaning of the words that we use. Otherwise, how will we think clearly and communicate adequately? So, three words which seem to be synonymous with each other, but actually they are different. Fear, terror, horror. Now, fear always pertains to what is going to happen. Fear is always about the future. For example, I fear that tomorrow there could be a train accident. I'm booked by a train to go from here to, say, Vijayawada or any place. And given how frequent rail accidents are these days, I fear that the train by which I propose to travel tomorrow could be involved in an accident. So fear is about whatever might happen in the future. It's not about today, it's not about yesterday. Horror is exactly the opposite. It is about what has happened in the past. If something extremely traumatic, shocking, unpleasant has happened in the past, I think of that with horror. Pardon me. I'm horrified at what has happened in the past. I can't say, if I'm using the English language properly, I can't be horrified at the train accident that may happen tomorrow. That would be doing violence to the English language, which we should not. So we've seen the difference between fear and horror. In between is the word terror. Terror pertains to what is happening now in the present. So when a terrorist attack takes place, the emotion that we feel is in the present. If a terrorist attack happened and it created a huge havoc, we'll be horrified at it. Or if there is an intelligence information that a terrorist attack is about to happen, say 10 days from now or 5 days from now, then we'll be fearful of it. We will not be terrorized by it. Terror is what we experience at the time when the attack is happening. So this should be clear. Now, with this clarity, let us examine this allegation made by the members of the BJP, not everyone, but those a few who have become very articulate on behalf of all the rest, insofar as the others have not disowned these allegations. We should imagine that it is a collective apprehension or an experience of terror experienced by everybody, but articulated by a few representatives who speak on behalf of the rest of the group as a whole. So when we say, or when the members of this party or ideological group complain that Rahul Gandhi is a terrorist, they're actually talking about their present state of mind. Why do I emphasize this? Because 10 years ago, the very same individuals would not have called or labeled Rahul Gandhi a terrorist, because at that time they were busy proving that he was a Pappu. And no Pappu can terrorize anyone. So to say that so-and-so is a Pappu and he's also a terrorist is a complete contradiction in terms, and it shows utter linguistic stupidity. And I can't accuse the BJP of that. They're very good, they're extremely intellectual, capable people, they know what they're talking about, they use words with great care, they pick and choose words with great care, particularly care as to the chiseled, venomous impact of the words that are used. In the present day context, there is no word of greater opprobrium or obloquy than terrorist. It has all kinds of baggages with it, particularly the baggage borrowed from Jammu and Kashmir and other parts of the country, Maoist terror, etc. So it's a very loaded word. And if you can actually successfully stick this label of a terrorist onto somebody else, you have done enough to destroy him, not merely to discredit him, but also to destroy him. So that's one part of the story. So when Rahul Gandhi is being labeled a terrorist, what the people who stick this label on him are saying is that you have a tremendous, or shall I say, terrible impact on us. You affect us in the most unbearable manner. You affect us, you impact us in the most powerful and potent manner. And not only that, imagine a terrorist attack in progress. One hallmark of that experience is utter confusion, unpreparedness in a state of confusion, and the inability to decide as to how to handle the situation. So there's always that element of bewilderment, incomprehension, of panic, and the inability to think appropriately, understand the situation right so as to cope with the situation effectively. Because if you understand the situation right and you are in complete control of it, you don't feel terrorized. You feel challenged, but you don't feel terrorized. So when a person says that he or she feels terrorized, fundamentally, if you really know the meaning of the word, fundamentally there is a confession in that use of word, in using that word, namely, that I feel totally bewildered and helpless. I really can't figure out what is hitting me. So please have mercy on me. That kind of a situation. That confession is embedded in this accusation. So it's not merely an accusation, but also a confession. And this is a point that I was making yesterday, though I may not have made it clear enough, for which I apologize. Now, the third point of my argument is, and this takes up specifically the point of dissent that was articulated yesterday by my viewers, all of whom I respect, I love, I cherish them, and I thank them for these responses, because these responses challenge me, enable me in a very constructive and profitable manner to think more clearly and creatively about whatever I say, which at the point of saying I may not have understood adequately or clearly enough. So by raising these points of dissent or deviation from my line of presentation, those who do so are doing me a very wholesome service. That's the reason why I sincerely feel grateful to them. Now the question is, can a man who preaches love, preaches the idea of unity based on the unconditional acceptance of each other, can a man who stands for the spiritual values as exemplified by Mahatma Gandhi, as Rahul Gandhi explicitly states, he acknowledges Mahatma Gandhi as his role model. Can someone who sincerely believes that even though, or precisely because he is a practitioner of the Hindu faith, he cannot believe in or practice violence, hatred, the prejudiced rejection and stigmatization of those who are different to himself? Can such a person be ever a terrorist? This question was raised even before the time we are discussing it. For example, when Chidambaram, the then Home Minister of India, made an unfortunate statement, which I don't want to quote, the point was made very clearly and convincingly that Hindus cannot be terrorists. I sincerely believe in it. No person, no Hindu, who takes his spiritual discipline, his religion and its spiritual discipline seriously, who believes in practicing the spiritual principles of Hinduism, can never be a terrorist. For that matter, I believe that no person who takes the spiritual core of his religion, no matter what his religion is, can never be a terrorist. A terrorist is one who is a living contradiction of the spiritual heart of the religion he represents and, most ironically, he defends. Islamic terrorism, if there is such a thing, is primarily a contradiction of Islam, only secondarily a contradiction of something else. Christian fundamentalism is a contradiction of Christianity as derived from the teachings of Jesus Christ, or at least it is a contradiction of the way of Jesus Christ. Christian fundamentalism, as also much of church dogmatism, amount to a contradiction of the way of Jesus Christ. That's the reason why, when it comes to the phenomenon called religion, the ultimate historical truth is that the most deadly enemies of a religion are always within its own fold. But the self-appointed custodians of every religion would create the canard and spread it around that religion is under attack from external enemies. Even if external enemies attack a religion, they cannot ruin it, they cannot spoil it. A religion can be corrupted and discredited and destroyed only by people within its fold. But that's not my main theme here, therefore, let me just mention this and pass on. So, can Rahul Gandhi, who claims to be a practitioner of Hinduism, who also insists, as he stated so emphatically with all the rhetorical effectiveness he could muster in his speech in the parliament, that a Hindu cannot believe in hatred, a Hindu cannot believe in violence, a Hindu cannot believe in disruption and disunity. A Hindu is one who is open to everyone, a Hindu who is Catholic in his outlook, most universal in his outlook. After all, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a spiritual vision India has contributed to the world heritage of spirituality. So I'm fully one with him in this respect. The question, therefore, is: can such a person strike terror in the minds of certain people? My answer is an emphatic yes. This is precisely what we need to understand. To understand this, we must understand the psychology of experiencing an experience of terror. When you experience terror, what happens? You feel that the very foundation on which you are standing is shaking. Only an experience that shakes the foundation of your existence strikes terror into you. For example, when an earthquake happens, what you're experiencing is not fear or horror, it is terror, because your very foundation is shaking. Now, the reason why whatever Rahul Gandhi is advocating is having such a terrible, unbearable, terrorizing impact on the members of the BJP and the Sangh Parivar is that he is actually challenging and shaking the very foundation on which they have erected their ideological vision and political advocacy, political agenda or projects. And that is the agenda of hate, the agenda of disunity, the agenda of homogenization, which necessarily will divide the Indian society into us and them. The idea of all Indians as belonging together to the motherland, to the Republic of India, as citizens protected within the framework of the Indian Constitution, where their fundamental rights are stipulated, respected, and committed to be protected, that will have to go out of the window. If this ideology of hate or homogenization, of us against them, the best way to prove your religious fervor is by hating those who are different to yourself, if that gains ground. So when Rahul Gandhi advocates love, he is advocating something which is foundationally different from the foundation on which the Sangh Parivar ideology and the politics of BJP are postulated and practiced. So what he is actually trying to do is to effect what we may call a foundation shift from one foundation to its opposite, not merely a different foundation, a contrary foundation. And that is something that's not very easy to stomach. If I may give you an analogy to understand this, imagine a car. You are driving a car. And then let's call that car the Sangh ideology and BJP political culture. This car is moving fast, fifth gear, 140 kilometers per hour, and is heading and streaking towards this destination. Then suddenly, a small fellow somewhere sitting on the back seat, without the permission of the driver, shifts the gear from the fifth to the reverse gear. And what happens? There will be a crash. That indeed is an act of terrorism, if you like. That is what I mean by shift in foundation or paradigm shift, which is the scientific terminology for it. A term popularized, as I pointed out on a previous occasion, by a very famous writer at that time. He is now no longer talked about. His name was Thomas Kuhn, Kuhn, and the title of his book was The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. That book was published in 1970, and clearly remember the publication of that book and how suddenly it created a sensation. That sensation lasted for about a quarter century, and it died out completely. Now nobody remembers that book. I don't know how many of you remember Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions, though it was extremely unfashionable, and you would be ridiculed in academic circles if you did not refer to Thomas Kuhn in the 70s, 80s, and much of 90s. But no, he's completely forgotten. That's another interesting phenomenon in the domain of culture. Things come and go, and in a state of accelerating obsolescence. As that interesting book, Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. Future Shock by Alvin Toffler argues very convincingly, supported with a ton of data. I can only make a reference to that book. Time doesn't allow me to go further into it. So, I can very well understand that Rahul, precisely because he preaches love, unity, mutual respect, tolerance, acceptance of the worth and the beauty of each other, can strike terror in the minds of his political antagonists or those in the opposite camp, for whom, quite obviously, the foremost stumbling block, in fact, the most unendurable headache, the political migraine, if you like, is Rahul Gandhi. And therefore, I can fully understand and empathize with, and I say this sincerely, the distress, the trauma expressed by the persons who today strain all their intellectual and nervous energy to prove that Rahul Gandhi is a terrorist. The only problem is that, unfortunately for them, not everybody in this country is obliged to think and feel the way they do, and therefore, in the minds of a vast majority of Indians, this attempt to stick the label of a terrorist on Rahul Gandhi would seem ridiculous, laughable, infantile, to the point of activating self-denigration. You insult yourself by doing what you do. When you try to do this kind of thing to somebody else, you're actually insulting yourself. You're actually exposing your own poverty, your own nervousness, your own inadequacy, your own helplessness, and your own lack of any confidence. And also, in its extreme state, it also denotes the psychological pathology of inventing enemies where none exists. Inventing enemies where none exists. So, does Rahul Gandhi strike terror in the minds of certain people? Yes. How does he strike terror? By preaching love, by advocating love. Can the advocacy of love create terror? Yes, depends on who is exposed to it. For example, we are familiar with the disease called rabies. Rabies. And if a mad dog bites, you get rabies. Water is a very good thing. For a person suffering from rabies, the sight of water will make him react in a very hysterical manner. He'll begin to bark like a dog. So he is terrorized by water. Or think of a person who has been shut up in a dark dungeon for 3 months, not allowed to see a single ray of light, and suddenly he is brought out into broad daylight. His eyes will hurt like hell. Light is a very good thing. For a person in that condition, it's an unendurably traumatic thing. I can offer other illustrations. Perhaps they are not necessary. So, even extremely good things can strike terror and create trauma in people depending on their condition. That's where we need to have compassion. And I was trying to be compassionate in the way I examined this phenomenon in the previous video, and I don't want to shift my foundation. I still take a compassionate view of it. But unfortunately, given the historical logic within which Rahul Gandhi has to function, I don't think he'll be able to extend further ounces of compassion to mitigate the trauma of those who are thus stricken by his advocacy of love, compassion, and the acceptance and tolerance of those who are different to oneself. That therefore there is a sense of historical pathos about this condition. And I would wait and see how this plays out. I'd like to see how the people in India in general, how they respond to this and to what extent they endorse or they reject this ascription of terrorism or this label of being a terrorist to Rahul Gandhi. Anyway, once again, I want to thank those who have expressed their differences with my line of thinking, which enabled me to think a little more clearly. And I have to say that I'm better off for their dissent. And that's the reason why we should never accept anything that anybody says on trust. Because such blind habitual acceptance denotes a state of intellectual passivity, even intellectual slavery, which is inimical to our growth and development. We must have the courage to disagree, but we must also have the grace to listen to each other. When you disagree with me, I should respect that dissent and then try to understand the logic that operates behind your dissent, which I should respect sincerely. Only then will I be able to think more clearly and constructively. And only when I think clearly and constructively will I grow from one state to the next state, go from point A to point B. And I can sincerely claim that my thinking on the subject is clearer today than it was yesterday. And for this increased clarity, I am deeply beholden to those who have expressed their difference of opinion. Thank you very much, and I wish all of you a very meaningful day ahead. And I wish members of the Sangh Parivar, members of the BJP, peace of mind, as well as the maturity to understand historical and human realities a little more comprehensively in an unbiased manner, to have the courage of truth in dealing with the human condition and historical logic. Jai Hind.